So as promised earlier, I am going to do you a little instructional video now of how my silver earrings are made. So this is my little example, if I can actually show you. Yes, here it is. So this is what I'm going to be making, and I'm now going to try and turn the camera around so that you can see the workplace, the workstation. It doesn't wobble all over the place. Hopefully you can see this. Right, so what we're going to use first is PMC, which comes in a little packet. The clay is silver with a binder on it, so it literally looks like a little bit of sort of greyish colour clay. I have my surface already prepared. I'm just going to put a little bit of badger balm on my surface so the clay doesn't stick, just like if you were rolling out pastry and you want to make sure your pastry doesn't stick. I am going to roll it out. The playing cards at the sides are there so that I know that my clay gets to a certain thickness, and if my silver gets too thin, when I fire it, it's going to just burn out, or I might snap it. I've just laid some texture on the top and I rolled it out, and now I'm going to get my cutter. Now hopefully I've been a bit tight with my amount of clay, so I'm hoping it will just stretch far enough for me to roll it out. It won't, so I'm just going to see if I can just stretch this a little bit further, and again I'm going to put my texture back on the top and let's see if that should just about be long enough now. So let's do that again. Yep, that's perfect. Place my cutter on the top. Any spare clay we get put away as quickly as possible, because otherwise it can dry out quickly. Hence why before I started I made myself a little prototype, and you see that little purple prototype. This is also really useful for showing you how much the clay shrinks when it's fired. So if you can see these two together, where's my hand? There we go. So putting these two together, there is a fractional difference in size between the two. Hopefully you can see that now. The clay shrinks by about 10%, which in something this small isn't very much. Now I've made my piece of clay, I need to just make a hole in it because it's going to be a pair of earrings. So I choose an area to make a hole. I'm actually going to go at the thicker end so that I've got more of a chance of not breaking through the clay. And then just to make sure these are a pair, yep, I've got one pointing that way and one pointing that way, so that's perfect for me. So what I will do now is I will lay this on a playing card which has already got badger balm on it, and I will let that dry out, and then I will show you the firing process later. So sometimes when you've made a piece of clay and you've dried it out, you then have a look at the piece and there are some minor problems with it. So before it's fired, you can actually do a lot of your finishing work. This is actually a different piece that I was making at the same time, so don't think, oh, she was making a holly leaf earlier, why is she making this heart? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to very gently file around the edges and just make it as good as I can pre-firing. There are several ways of firing. So you can fire with a kiln, which is kind of the ideal situation if you've got one. You can fire with a torch, or you can fire on a gas hob. So a gas hob's pretty cool if you've got one at home that you don't have to go to any expense to buy anything else. But a torch or a kiln, they all achieve the same sort of thing, but people have their own personal preferences to what they like to fire with, and the kiln is really sort of user friendly in a way, although it's expensive. So it depends what you've got and what you've got access to. So here I'm just using a little hand drill just to make the hole I made earlier just a little bit neater, and so I know it's got a 2mm drill bit on it. I know that I'm going to be able to get a jump ring through it later. So I've just tidied that up. And where my clay is still a tiny little bit damp, I might have to just wait to brush any of those spare bits of clay out later. Oh no, that's come out okay actually. So the only other thing that I might want to do, I've sanded around the edges, but there's a few little bits on there that I'm not happy with, some little marks. So I'm going to use the clay in the paste form, so a bit like slip if you're using ordinary clay, to just fill in any little areas that I wasn't happy with. So I'm just going to, there's a little bit of a line on there. I'm just going to paint some clay over the top of that. And then where I've got a little bit of a dip where I was trying to just stretch this extra little bit of clay, I shall fill that in, just so I've got a nice smooth finish. But this sort of middle stage, if you like, the finishing stage pre-firing, when it's in its green state, can take hours. It depends how fussy you are and how quick you were to get your design out in the prototype stage. You may have been able to do it really, really quickly, really, really easy, had a simple design and it all goes really well. Or you may find that you look at it and you've got lots of scratches in it and things like that that you're not happy with, in which case you can keep filing down and adding more sort of the paste to it to see what happens. It's really in sort of how good your eyes are and how fussy you get. Some people, when I teach a class, want to spend hours on this stage, and some people just say, do you know what, that looks fine, I'm quite happy with that. It's much easier to do your work now than once the silver is fired and it's a hard piece of metal. So torch firing. So when you go to fire your piece of clay, make sure it is dry. Just get rid of some of this clutter. My workshop is getting to be a bit of a mess. It's that silly season. Your torch will then need to be turned on. So I unlock it first of all, pop some gas on. Make sure that I have my flame correct. So I don't want the really cold flame. I say cold flame. The cooler flame. I want, this is the hottest flame, I sort of want slightly less than that. Now I'm going to just aim the torch at my piece of clay and the binder will start to burn off, which is what it's doing at the moment. You see that flame patching? So that is the binder burning away. Now my piece of clay will start to shrink and go white. And then what I'm waiting for is for my piece of clay to start glowing sort of orange from inside, and then I know I can time it for a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's really hard to see this sort of glow, and that's why people aren't so keen on torch firing sometimes. It's just like everything else, it takes practice. Right, so I've got that orange glow now, so I'm just going to count in my head for about 2 minutes. I will bring this back on once I've finished firing. So my 2 minutes is up and I've finished firing. So obviously this is really hot now. So I'm going to grab hold of it with my tongs and quench it. Okay. And once I've quenched it, I can then bring it back to my work area. And I can start to polish. So at the moment, can you see how white it is? So basically, once I start polishing it, that will bring the silver out. So basically, all the particles are laying in all funny directions at the moment. So once I have started to polish it, I start to flatten them down, and then the light travels better through the silver, and so it becomes more shiny. So I don't know, can you see that that's now quite silver? So you go through the stages of brushing, and then when you've brushed, you can then grab a burnishing tool and you can start to go across the surface and do final finishing. Now some people, particularly people who've done a little bit of silversmithing the more conventional way, will use various grades of sandpaper, and they will use a Dremel and things like that to polish, which you can do, because anything you do now is what you would do with normal silver. However, a lot of people like the finish to be shiny, but not that ultra shiny that you get from a piece of flat silver. So they will probably just stop with the burnishing, and that's perfectly adequate. It depends on personal preference, really. You can also get a tumbler, and the tumbler works with soap and shot, and it spins your piece around, and will polish that up really, really well. So it just depends what sort of finish you're after, what work you do now. But the key work, the key finishing work, is done in that green state pre-firing, where you try and get rid of all the cracks or any little imperfections, anything that might mean your silver would break. You do that then, and then when you get to this stage, it's just a nice little polishing job. Of course, you can get your silver cloth out and things like that, and then you can make it into something wearable. So thank you for watching my tutorial. Bye bye.